I guess it would be best, Laura, if you could start by just explaining to the folks here a little bit about your role and your team and how you guys are focused on modern marketing capabilities.
All right, sure. So again, I'm Laura Knebusch. I'm head of marketing for Georgia Pacific Consumer Products. We make a lot of household essential brands like Brawny and Sparkle paper towels, Quilted Northern and Angel Soft bath tissue, Dixie plates, Vanity Fair napkins, as well as a number of professional brands. And so my team is responsible for supporting them in achieving their brand objectives through everything from insights and content and media, promotions, shopper marketing, and analytics.
How big is your team?
I have about 82 people on the team right now.
Oh,
So
big team.
good size.
Lots of brands, big team.
Yes.
Yes. So it's easy to feel like you're boiling the ocean when it comes to marketing, and not all tactics and channels work for all brands in the same way. Have you been able to sort of hone in on what those key essential factors are for success in modern marketing? If you were to sort of sum it up to kind of set some themes for us.
Yes, absolutely. So I took on my role pretty much in the middle of the pandemic. And if you haven't heard, toilet paper was a very big item during the pandemic. So I didn't actually have to do any work for a couple months because everyone was buying all of our product anyway. But it did kind of set us up for, we needed to think entirely differently about the capabilities we had in the organization. Consumers were changing, shopping was changing, technology was changing, media was changing. And for our brands to actually come out of the pandemic when kind of the new normal started to emerge, we needed very different capabilities. And, I'd say there's four key areas we focused on. One is something I called living our brands, which is just about kind of foundationally being ingrained with your consumer, ingrained with your brand promise, and how you deliver that across everything that you do. That to me was actually not new, but it was really, really important that we were clear on how to do that. The second, I would say, was a more of an evolution of capability around really modernizing our media mix. We were very heavy in linear TV, and that was no longer going to be successful for our brands. And so we really needed to shift pretty significantly into digital, and not just into digital, but expand the channels and the tactics and have a better way to experiment and learn. And then the third area is what I would consider more of our transformative area, and that is around data and technology. Really thinking about our data strategy, our data foundation, and then our MarTech roadmap. And then the fourth, but probably most critical area, was talent and having a different type of talent strategy. We had to build out a marketing technology team. Those are resources we had never had in the team before. We built out more in-house capabilities. We have an in-house creative team called Treehouse. We have an in-house digital buying or programmatic team. We have brought analytics in-house. We have brought search in-house. So really building out and kind of finding that right balance of where we need to leverage our external partners versus where we needed to build internal capabilities to be more agile, to be more efficient, and to be better prepared to achieve modern marketing.
Wow, that's a big undertaking and a lot. As you've kind of worked through all of those elements, what would you say were the key challenges you faced along the way?
Yeah, I put them into three buckets. I mean, first is the consumer, as we talked about, kind of changing consumer. And the last 2 years in particular have been very challenging for our kind of everyday consumer who is, facing economic pressures that they've never had before and is having to make choices about what they are going to buy and what's the right thing to do for their family. And while I think we hear data points that make it feel like the recession isn't happening, we know that consumers aren't feeling that every day and their wallets aren't feeling that. And we need to give them a reason to buy our brands because they have alternatives like private label. And so I would say that is from a competitive standpoint for us, that's one of our biggest challenges is of consumers willing to, buy a private label and not seeing what the relevance is or that value is in buying a brand. I think the second kind of biggest challenge has been just about the sheer number of media touch points and how to reach the consumer. It creates such a great opportunity, but as you think about making those choices, the right investment choices, as you think about executing against those choices, and then as you think about measuring those choices when so much of that media is now behind walled gardens, that also becomes a pretty big challenge. And then I think the third one we faced was really data privacy. Even without the yo-yo of the cookie deprecation, we know the regulation is there. We know consumers are looking for those privacy compliant environments. But how do we target? How do we create relevant experiences and do that in a privacy compliant way?
Right, show up authentically in a way that's positive. I guess another thing would be along with overcoming all of those things and staying true and having the brands be recognized by your consumers, how have you been able to do all of those things and stay close to the business goals of Georgia Pacific at large? Which is never an easy thing. It's the CFO, CMO,
Yes.
marketing
Yes.
dance.
I mentioned one of our capabilities was something we called living our brand, and that's not a marketing capability. That is a business imperative, and that was something that our team kind of really advocated for. Was the organization needed to understand the target? This isn't just marketing's job to go build our brands. We say building brands is about creating something worth demanding, and that's everybody's job. Marketing is about helping to drive that demand, but everybody is responsible for building the brand. And that required a mindset shift in the organization. So we had training, we have immersions with who our consumer targets are, we have personas for our consumers. So we call them by name. It's Rose and Trish and Nikki and Jessica. So you can really start to visualize who these people are, and as whether it's someone in marketing or someone in manufacturing on the line who's making a choice about, is this the right quality for Rose? They've got that in their mind about why it's so important that it needs to be the right quality, or why we need to make sure it gets to the distribution. So that's been, I think, really important, just to get the organization very clear on who our target is and the single brand promise that we want to make to that target. That is going to be their reason for choosing us versus their alternatives. And so that has been a foundation that I think has been really helpful in making sure all the way from business strategy to marketing strategy we're tied. But then the key kind of tools we use is we actually take the business goal, whether that's growing sales or growing share, and we translate that into a very specific consumer goal. So how do we do that? Is that about driving penetration? Is that about new to category? Is that about sourcing households? Is it about sourcing occasions? But we really want to focus on one way to do that. So we, again, can be very single-minded and focused on how we build out then the plan, turn that into a marketing objective and then build out the plan. So then obviously the other key aspect once we build out the plan is measurement. We are a very, I would say, quantitative driven organization. We like to see numbers. It makes us feel a lot better about the money we're investing, as we go back to the CFO and to our brand stakeholders. And so we have been very disciplined about how we're going to measure. And then we've had to kind of just build the credibility within the organization that we're going to measure. If it's good, we're going to ask you to invest more. But if it's bad, we will make changes and we will do it differently. And so we have to be able to kind of make both calls, and we have been able to build that credibility with the organization.
Yeah, no, that's incredible, and it's a lot to undertake. The whole concept of the pivoting, what you're talking about, sort of making those changes and doing the pivots that are needed, it goes back to data and analytics in some ways. Like, how are you, in an ongoing way, utilizing data and analytics to increase personalization, make sure you're connecting with Rose and Trish and all those folks in the most authentic way, showing up at the right times and the right ways?
Yeah, so this was one of the things I'm most proud of that we've built over the last couple years. So we're CPG, which means we don't own the end transaction, which of course is the sweet spot of data. But we had a lot of data. It was just data that was sitting in silos. It was sitting in Excel spreadsheets. It might have been with our agency, or it was very specific people's responsibility to look at that data. So we were not leveraging the power of what we had. So we underwent a kind of 18-month journey to build out a data lake. And we connected 40 plus sources of marketing data into the data lake. We updated the taxonomy, which isn't sexy, but was so important to get done, to make sure that we could actually harmonize that data together and we could start to really use this as one source of truth versus like multiple reports. And then we put it into a tool that was easy to use, accessible to everybody, and to help visualize. And that's helped power a couple things from an analytics standpoint. We did bring in marketing mix modeling. For previously, we would do it every 2 years because it was costly and it was time consuming. And then once we brought it in-house, we could do it every year. Now we're starting to test out doing it every 6 months. So the ability to take this from a kind of looking at the past versus something that you can actually really start to make actionable decisions has been really helpful. The other thing is, I mentioned we have an in-house programmatic team. They are in this data every single day, pulling a number of different kind of factors to understand how to optimize kind of what's working from a targeting standpoint, what's engagement, what's viewability, and making sure that we're, constantly optimizing and updating and informing kind of new decisions that we're making. So those are just two areas that I think have been really helpful in us making better decisions about when and how we're going to reach the target, and able to do that on a more frequent basis to really get the impact from it.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's interesting. A year or two ago, you heard a ton about data lakes and MMM and MTA and how they're being utilized, and then you sort of heard a little bit of a theme to go away from that. Everyone was sort of focused on last touch attribution and giving the all currency to last touch attribution. How have you felt about MMM and the kind of metrics you're sort of seeing out of that to understand the holistic journey of your customers?
Yes, and we do look at it as there's multiple data points we use to make our decisions. MMM is important to us because it is the one tool we have that we can look holistically across all of our investments. Because of walled gardens, because of other factors, it can be hard to really understand kind of your reach and your impact across all of your digital channels. So we do rely on MMM to be one source of truth. We've also partnered with Circana, and we actually do a quarterly sales lift study with them. Again, that's a narrow scope as we look more at kind of digital and video. That's been very helpful for us to make more frequent decisions. And then we also rely on some of our longer term equity metrics to make sure that we're not just thinking about this in the short term, but continue to make the right decisions for the brands in the long term.
It's a lot. Just to add in one more. Retail media networks, obviously, we're talking CPG. I wouldn't want to not bring up how you're utilizing retail media networks to sort of evolve a lot of the strategies it seems like you're already honing. I'm sure that's a major part of the structure. What is really working for you there and what is not working for you there?
Sure, I've talked a lot about that in the last 2 days because I think I've met with every
I
retail
imagine.
media network.
I'm sorry.
Yes. It is important, and it has become, I would say, a meaningful part of our marketing investment. Some of the biggest retail media players are some of our biggest customers. It's the Walmarts, it's the Amazons, it's the Club, it's Target and Kroger. So it was really important for us to invest and learn and optimize. And we actually have a kind of assessment before we start to invest in a retail media network, a maturity assessment. And that helps us understand, hey, is this someone, it's more of a preferred partnership. We want to learn and experiment together. We want to make sure we're with them at the forefront of what's happening versus all the way to, this is basically a tax you're asking us to pay and we're not actually getting any business value out of it. And we've trained our sales force on that because they're the ones in the conversation a lot of the times so that they feel comfortable with the metrics around why we feel that way. For some, why we're willing to lean in with some and not with others. And that's been really important to get both sales and marketing on the same page about it, because these can be pretty challenging conversations when they're built in with distribution and other factors. What we have been excited about, I think, is with the ones who have matured, the Walmart Connects, the Amazons, the Krogers, and are now showing those capabilities to be full funnel. And so we've started to adjust our planning process, where previously, I'm my head of shoppers in the room, like we would think about retail media as shopper. And we would think about, all our national media as awareness and consideration versus conversion. And now we've started to approach this more from what's the best way to reach our audience. So whether it's, from a national media or retail media, who's my target? Yeah. And then what are the best data sources to get to that target? And a great example is AngelSoft, which is one of our biggest brands. Also, their consumer aligns very heavily with the Walmart consumer. So as we were planning for AngelSoft, and looking all the way down at their full funnel plan, we thought it was their potential to use the Walmart audiences to reach them from a national standpoint. There was a lot of power in being able to drive that connection. And so that's something that we did last year and we'll measure with MMM this year. So I do think there's a lot of great capabilities out there. There's still a lot that's promised and hasn't come to fruition yet. So, we try and be choiceful in where we invest. Yeah. We try and test and learn as much as we can. But where we are seeing success, then we will invest further, and the partners see that.
It might sound obvious, but in thinking about the brands and how you make each of them stand on their own with authentic partnerships, it's interesting to hear you say AngelSoft and Walmart, Sparkle, maybe Walmart, Northern Quilter, it's another big retailer. So it's very interesting to kind of think about that. Thanks for that. Just pivoting a little bit, as a leader of not just a brand, but a team, and all of the changes you've been through, especially since the pandemic and everything, how do you foster a culture of innovation and curiosity and sort of keep the team motivated on building the brands? And getting through all the analytics
Yes.
and the manual stuff.
I'm very lucky in that Georgia Pacific, at the core of its kind of principles, is about innovation. And we are looking for people who are principled entrepreneurs. That's one of the signs of success in our company, is if you are someone who is actively looking for opportunities, actively looking for how you can create value, and identifying solutions to do that. And in fact, we use a term called creative destruction a lot, which is basically the idea that if you're not kind of destroying your processes or your initiatives, someone else is doing it. So you might as well be the one at the forefront versus kind of being caught behind. And so I think that's just important from a company standpoint. And that means the talent that we like is entrepreneurs, lifelong learners, a lot of intellectual curiosity, people who are agile. And so that's really important, I think, in an innovation-focused environment. But the reality is there is a lot of day-to-day that happens, and it's very easy for innovation to kind of get put to the wayside. So I do have some dedicated resources on my team, and they're actually in the room today as well. So I brought lots of friends with me. And it's important for them because they're helping to drive the overall roadmap for our marketing innovation. What are those key, we call them domains, but what are the key domains that we want to go deeper in, that we think we can create more value with our consumer, if we find some different solutions. So obviously there's a lot within AI and technology. There's a lot with creating relevant experiences. And so that roadmap isn't executed only by these resources, but it means that the entire team knows what we're prioritizing, where to focus, and then we have a way to connect information to help learn and build on the different experiments. And that also requires having some dedicated funding. Honestly, I would like it if we actually had more that we did just towards experimentation. And I know Sarah in the back row would also like it if we had more. But we are trying to make sure that we're carving that out so that we can experiment. And I'd say maybe one of the most important things has been what I will call the willingness to fail and the willingness to scale. Because innovation is nothing if you don't actually make choices with it. And I think the organization has seen when things haven't worked, we've stopped and we've moved on. And we've done that with AI tools, we've done that with media experiments, but they've also seen us lean in where we're seeing things with potential and really scale. A couple years ago, our brands weren't in audio at all. And so we did some easy experiments, and now most of the brands are investing in audio. We're starting to test podcasts and host read. And so, really using it to help us make decisions and drive that moving forward.
That's amazing. The emerging technologies that you're sort of leaning into there, can you give an example of, whether it be AI or through analytics, through your media mix, that you've really kind of put some of those to work?
Yes, I mean, I would say definitely from an AI, I think we've had a great team who's really leaned in and thinking about the potential, and going back almost 2 years ago now, really laying out, we started with our content process and really laid out where do we think throughout the entire process from creation to production to kind of deployment, that there are pain points that could be improved through the leveraging of AI. And so where we've seen potential is certainly generative AI and copywriting and image generation. We've seen some potential to reduce some very manual tasks, where we had it kind of within our DAM and just kind of metadata tagging and things that are really helping just kind of reduce friction and reduce kind of low value work or low fulfillment work. And so we're starting to scale that up. E-com content and copy, we've seen some potential there. But we've got a lot, I think, coming and in process, both within the world of kind of generative AI. I think something we're excited about is text to video. We're starting to see more of that out there, but that's something I think within our brands we see the potential for. I think even more forward-looking, obviously a lot of talk this week about agentic AI and what that means. We've got a lot of folks in our organization with varying levels of knowledge around marketing, and I just think about what if you had your marketing agent who you could talk through how to write a brief, how to make some of your decisions. What if we could actually turn one of those, turn our consumer persona, leverage it for consumer persona. So if you were thinking about something for your consumer Rose, you could actually ask her about it and say, hey, how would you think about this? And have real-time conversations. I mean, that's the stuff that it's scary and creepy, but also very exciting.
And that efficiency and removing the frictions and working faster. It's also interesting, especially when you're trying to do so much across so many brands and a very big team. not to make you brag more or showcase anything else, but I saw the Starship ad for Northern Quilter, and I was like, wow, that is an amazing spot, 60 seconds long. Obviously, you said it's a lot about the team, and there's a lot of really talented people that you've sort of honed to put together. Could you give an example of something you're just really proud of that your group has sort of worked on in the last year?
Yeah, it is great. I feel like we've been building capabilities for the last 3 years, but really started to see some of those come to life in the last year or so. And so you mentioned kind of the Quilted Northern ad. If you haven't seen it,
it's amazing. Not to show my age, but it's Starship.
So go
awesome.
Google it. But it is a takeoff on We Built This City called We Quilt This City, and it is fantastic. And it was actually just named the top 10 ad by Adweek for 2024. So that's that type of recognition after all this work is exciting for the brands. But you can also go back to the marketing capabilities we talked about. I mean, it started with Trish is our Quilted Northern consumer, and it started with understanding her coming out of the pandemic. And comfort to her was always important, but it took on, I think, a different level of meaning coming out of the pandemic. And that's what Quilted Northern can bring to her versus a Charmin or a Cottonelle, which is more about clean or strength. Quilted Northern brings comfort because it's the only quilted brand. And so that led us to really lean into the ideas of quilts and a campaign called Keep It Quilted. And then this ad, We Quilt the City, and the Quilted Queens who are singing it is what has kind of been the next evolution of how we do it. But it's also helped us inspire a different media mix, more heavy into audio, more heavy into influencer and social, because it's just more naturally a place to kind of tell the story that we have with the Quilted Queens in the song. And then behind it, data and technology, helping us with the right targeting, helping us with making really smart inclusion, like inclusion lists, with YouTube, so that it's playing within the right context and the right content. And so we're really excited with kind of the results we've seen, the recognition. I mean, that's great for the organization to start to see some of that come to life. But then also it's a platform for what comes next year. And so hopefully I'll have some even cooler things to talk about next year this time.
It's great to see everybody have a little fun with the whole idea and sort of is sticky at the same time. I think we have about 5 minutes or so left. Does anyone have any questions for Laura?
I understand after listening to you why you have 80 people. Was it 80 people?
82.
You might need a few more than that. But as I listen to you talk about, each brand has to have such an individual persona. How do you, as a leader across all those brands, sort of make those determinations of, what brand goes first? How are we investing in that brand? I mean, is it strictly a numbers game, or is there a more emotional connection, more data behind those decisions that you have to make across so many brands? I mean, who goes first and who's on what, It's a lot.
Sure. So we are working with each individual kind of brand team on their objective and kind of their growth potential and their, and their marketing objective. And so we actually look at it versus, oh, here's our marketing investment and let's prioritize. We actually build it up more from the ground. And that's, again, part of the culture of, we don't like budgets. We're about creating long-term value. And if investing in all the brands means creating long-term value, we want to do that. So we are looking at it more from what's needed to achieve the objective for that specific target and for that specific brand. And then understand, hey, well, are we going to have conflicts? So Walmart, I'll say Brawny and Sparkle, they both want to invest in retail search, but we don't want to compete against each other. So there are choices we're going to make within that to make sure that we're maximizing the total versus competing against each other. But fortunately, the company is one that we want to make sure we're driving value where we believe the potential is. And so we're willing to kind of invest and make those choices where we can.
Hi, Ted Rubin. Thank you. This is really great listening and hearing the sharing. And, we all hear so much about retail media networks. It's nice to hear that it really is a limited universe where the true value is. But I have a question for you, being that you're involved in marketing and customer experience. So all brands do a really good job of marrying customer experience for their products with the consumer. How do you look at going beyond that and looking at the customer experience with your marketing? So the point where you don't overdo the point, where you're following people around, you're retargeting people. How do you get them to not have that feeling where they just shut it off? So
it's a great question. And I think we're all trying to still figure out the balance. Because we are I would say kind of more mass reach brands, we do kind of have a balance of personalization. How much is more about, reaching kind of the right target at the right time with the right message versus really like very, very specific, really get kind of one-on-one personalization. We have been able to build our own first-party database, and we've learned a lot with that as far as what does value look like? What do you want to hear about? What are you going to, unsubscribe us for? And so we've used that as an experimentation tool for us to understand, again, as a CPG, how do we create value for you on a more personalized level? What are the offers? What's the news? Where can we give you kind of reduce friction for you and your experience to be able to do that? But I would say it's an ongoing learning.
So I'm curious, something that I don't see a lot of marketers do, and I'm just guessing maybe you do from what I'm hearing, although there's so many brands involved. But do you encourage your marketers to sign up for your own marketing? Like to put yourself on your own email marketing list, to sign up or follow your brand around the internet or around the things you're doing so you see what they're seeing versus just seeing it from your perspective of trying to reach them?
We absolutely do want to make sure, the advocacy for your brands has to start within your organization. And I say this a lot, like, if we're not out there supporting and following our brands, like, why should anybody else? And so we want to, one, create advocates of the employees in the organization, but two, you get some real-time feedback. Like this is something we kind of messed up on. We sent out an email and it had an image, and the brand director looked at the image and called me up and was like, "Hey, this is," so they're watching it and they're holding us accountable to make sure we're doing the right thing as well. So we do need to make sure we're following our marketing and we're reading our reviews. That's another really important factor. Just what are people saying about you? And again, real-time feedback so that you get the reality check. But then also, like I said, I really want people to follow our brands, and I want them to talk about our brands. I want them to advocate for our brands because we should be the biggest advocates and proponents for our brands out in the marketplace.
Laura, this is great. Thank you so much. When you think about Amazon and your strategy with Amazon, can you maybe tell us, like Amazon Buy with Prime, have you looked into that? But what's your strategy with Amazon globally?
Sorry, can you be more specific around just media or?
I think media, but also just like customer acquisition and lifetime value. And how do you think about acquiring a customer versus a competitor? And obviously like Amazon Germany versus UK versus Canada.
Yeah, so we are actually, U.S. based. So I guess the good news is it's less about kind of from a global standpoint, but certainly I think we're always trying to, again, balance what we invest to acquire a consumer with Amazon. Subscribe and save is a big part of our plan, but it's also, we're investing for that. So what do we truly understand about the value of someone we get through subscribe and save? And how, what are we willing to do to acquire that consumer? Which for us is, again, as a CPG kind of more mass brand, we don't have to think about that in a lot of other mediums, but it is something that, as we continue to grow in e-commerce and grow our digital share, we need to be more focused on. And so it's different by brand. And so this is where, again, analytics are really important, your specific brand objective, kind of what your kind of long-term goals are. But we, absolutely have partnered with Amazon. We actually have some pretty strong digital share on Amazon. What we like is, with some of these e-commerce channels is where we have some pretty big competitors. When you walk into a Target or a Walmart, you see a lot of Charmin, but we kind of look at e-commerce as, that digital shelf is all equal. You've kind of leveled the playing field, and so it has given our brands a chance to really show strength in other ways than just kind of from the pure shelf standpoint. And so we do want to win, and we do want to invest, but absolutely the analytics of kind of where that trade-off is something we're looking at all the time.
All right, thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Laura and Jen. Thank you very much.